All right. Thanks, John. John periodically asks the associate deans to give some sort of intellectual integrity presentation, and we're only too happy to comply.
And we ask Paul to do it. So that's
Uh,
we are here for moral support.
I'm going to share my screen and show some slides for you. I'm really only here just to talk about the numbers. The other associate deans are going to actual talk to you about important things, but I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of uh, what the landscape of intellectual integrity looks like from the last couple of years, and noticing that the last year singular is somewhat different than the previous. So, in a typical SUNY Oswego semester, something like 40 students will be cited for violating the campus policy on intellectual integrity. It varies, sometimes in the higher 50s, sometimes down into the 20s, but that's a spring fall average over 7 years. So these are pretty robust numbers. If you didn't know, about 50% of those cited for violations will be in lower intermediate level classes, and about 50% will be from upper division classes. So there's really not a statistically valid uh, slant toward intro level courses or toward upper level courses. And there's absolutely no slant in terms of student standing. The breakdown is very close to 25% in each of the four status bins or standing bins. So freshmen and seniors alike will do bad things, perhaps not surprisingly. Again, in a typical semester, although 80% of the reports on average come from CLAS courses, CLAS courses are the largest body of courses on campus. CLAS majors only commit about 50% of the violations. So if you're an advisor or instructor in CLAS, you can feel, I guess, a little bit good about that. Um, Again, in normal semesters, SCMA is the only one where the number reported and the number who are majors is about the same. In the other schools, there's something of an imbalance. Um, One thing to note that we can certainly talk about later is that significantly less than 15%, I didn't do the real numbers, but it's less than 15% of all the violations that we have accounted for over the past 7 odd years have triggered an automatic failing grade in the course, which speaks to bigger things that are important to talk about, but we'll get to that later. Spring 2020 was a mess. I think that anyone who was instructing or advising or anywhere near campus would agree with that. But it wasn't really a chaotic mess from an intellectual integrity standpoint. There was a very large number of violations, something like 3.5 times what we would get in an average semester. Um, so that's bad. But the breakdown was really fairly similar to what we would see in a regular semester. So it wasn't that there was concentrated cheating in any one place that we wouldn't otherwise have seen. It was just a ramping up of ramping up of violations reported. And this is another thing that we could certainly talk for hours about, the fact that reports don't equal uh, incidents. The fact that there are lots of incidents that go unreported, that go undetected, that go blind eye turned. But anyway, all we have to deal with are the violation reports. Um, of interest this past spring is that there was a concentration in terms of where they were coming from within CLAS, and math did a whole lot of reporting of violations, and the combination of math and econ had the lion's share. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. It certainly is, it's good from my standpoint because it means that faculty are engaged. They are watching for this and they are making sure that students are held accountable, which is really what we want to have happen. In the spring, I think that there was a general predisposition that these are extreme times, and to a large extent, faculty were not leveling the most severe penalties on students unless they were really quite egregious offenses. So most of these 137 violations didn't lead to an automatic failing grade in the course. And finally, in fall of 2020, we did not see the huge number that we saw in spring, which is good, but it was higher than normal, about 50% higher than normal. The percentages were a little bit off, but within a fairly generous statistical envelope, they were pretty similar to what we ordinarily see. So that is my speed take on the numbers, and I will turn it over to the participants, the other associate deans for their insightful comments, Liz Schmidt to talk about Chegg.
Oh yeah, I mean, if Liz wants to get started with Chegg, then I can build on what we did in the School of Business based on what Chegg has brought to the forefront.
Oh, are you guys participating in the Chegg pilot?
I'm not sure.
Okay, please don't. But I'll just say Chegg over the summer, and I know they reached out to Sarah Bonzo because she's been having issues as well, but Chegg has this new thing they're rolling out, this kind of security feature. And the idea is you upload your questions ahead of time and they'll basically put a block or a bot so that if students try and upload them in real time, they'll be caught.
I remember now. Okay, yeah. Okay.
But basically, if you read it, Chegg will basically then kind of own those questions that you upload. So they're basically tricking people into getting a whole database. I don't know. I'm just I don't know. It's like, how stupid do you think I am? Okay. But I think Chegg's going to get into the proctoring business, right? They created a problem that they're now going to proctor for. I hate them so much.
I think they've changed the policy. They've changed the policy a little bit because I know this past semester, Andrea submitted the standard request, and they came back with give the incident number and give the case number and all that, which did not happen previously because I know Andrea and Sarah had been, and I think Mary maybe had submitted something, the standard format, and they came right back. But this time they did not. This time they said, give us the incident number, give us the case number or whatever. So I think now they're realizing that we're getting smart. So now they're trying to put up roadblocks.
Right, they're slower. And I think they have more traffic. The honor code requests were slower this past semester, but I suspect that can be explained by more traffic. The DMCA takedowns are still 24 hours. So if you can search ahead and find older content that made its way there, the DMCA takedowns are still happening pretty fast because I think that's a pretty automated process for them. I guess maybe honor code takes a little more, but honor code did take a little longer. But here's the good news for faculty on here is what I've known. Since I got stricter about it in the fall of 2019 and saw how much of my content was on there, I became very clear with students up front and during the semester about what would happen. I was very consistent and the students talked to each other. And so even though we're more online, the incidence of Chegg problems that I have has dropped dramatically, just really in a 3-semester period. So I think students get very savvy about where they think they can get away with something and where they can't, and what they can get away with, and they adapt to it. So I do think that is changed quite a bit. So people are thinking, if for every single semester, am I going to have to be this guardian? I would say, I don't think so. I think once you kind of establish some policies and take some minimal steps in how you design questions, I think the problem dramatically reduces. So.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely right. Liz, we're no longer in a world where you can realistically just blat out the same questions that you had last semester or whenever. Everyone's got to understand that you've got to expect that there's going to be a population of students that will be tempted to look. And if you make it easy for them, it in their mind, it becomes more an incentive to do that. So the more disincentive we can give, I think the better it is for everybody.
Sure, but I would, again, as the optimist, if you want to reuse questions, I think during the summer, I just take a day and I set up 2 screens and I have my DMCA notice in a Google form, in a Google file, and I'm looking at questions in Chegg on the other screen. And you can go through, and then everything that happened that year, anyone that that eventually winded up being posted, you can wipe them out, and then you sort of start fresh again, and that way you sort of know. So even you can preview when you're posting assignments, you can preview whether or not they're up there and get them taken down pretty quickly. So I found that I've been able to reuse questions if I'm just sort of careful about it. Do a little bit of
That's what I've been doing. I'm sorry.
But they also appear on Course Hero, Study Blue, and behind other paywalls that we can't find as easily. So there's a good chance they appear elsewhere. I had quite a few show up last summer, long after I had checked these things.
So I have a question. Do you have data on if we actually, how many repeat violations there were? Like how many students, are reported more than once for?
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons, Magdalena, why it's so important that faculty report, because if a student is going to be a serial offender and no one in their 100 and 200 level classes ever reports them, then they're going to get to the 300 level classes and they're basically going to have a freebie. They're going to be able to cheat, they'll get their little penalty, they'll move on. Whereas if they had gotten caught in a 100 or 200 level course, we'd be able to say, yes, this is a repeat offender. This is, this wasn't just someone who didn't understand what plagiarism was all about. This is someone who's really trying to get something for nothing. And, those are the people that we and the Student Conduct Office wants to extirpate, wants to get out of here. And I think that Alexis Pinheiro Benson has a real appetite for doing that. And he's told the associate deans on many occasions that he's kind of amazed at the light penalties that students get for some of the things that he sees them doing. So it's, it's a balance. There are some instructors who are too draconian with penalties, and there are some instructors who are too sympathetic. And I understand that we're in a time where sympathy runs high, but at very least reporting students so that we can have that data set and we can say after a second offense, we need to talk to this person. And, potentially we need to do something from a conduct standpoint to let that person know that this is not what we do.
I agree with Paul. I'll give you an example of my own. One semester, and this was before I realized I needed to be clear on my own syllabus. I caught a student cheating on an exam, and I asked some of the other faculty what penalty they were giving. And because I had not clearly put it in my syllabus what penalty I was going to give them, I actually gave them a lower penalty than I wanted to, because others were giving something less. The following semester, to be clear, on the first day I tell them, you cheat on the exam, there is no discussion, you automatically fail the course. That is now language that is in my syllabus. But I think across campus, Paul is right. There is a level of inconsistency, and I know there is an issue of freedom. I mean, it's your course, what you want to do, but I think from perspective, I think we need some consistency in enforcement, because you can't have a different level of penalty for the same crime, so to speak. I don't know, it's not a crime, but if we can use that word.
Infraction?
Okay, infraction, that's better.
So, but you don't know what percent of students who are reported, what percent of them will get reported again?
That's true, but you really do have to think of the scale of the defense. Like Rehan said, cheating on an exam maybe should be a failing grade in the course. And you're right, I got very explicit about that. But if you have a minor quiz or homework, it's more of an escalating. Maybe you impose an academic penalty and repeated offenses again, escalate the penalty or things like that. So, I mean, I know as Paul mentioned, some people are too harsh. The idea is, you know, someone copied a paragraph in a large paper and then the faculty says you flunked the class and it's a 100-level class and maybe that's not the appropriate penalty. That doesn't mean the appropriate penalty is 0, right? But that's probably not the appropriate penalty in the class. And so that's like in yesterday's seminar, you really got to think about what are the graded activities in my class and what constitutes dishonesty on those activities and what kind of penalties could you expect. And I think you save yourself a lot of trouble if you're really clear about that up front.
I have a question about the list of the database that is kept by students who have violations. Is that a college-wide one? I mean, or is it kept by school?
Yeah, it's all the associate deans add their data into the same list. So we've got everyone that we are aware of. And since we're doing this, since reporting is through Maxient, it's a little easier to not miss violations as they come in. But we get them all.
And I don't know if Liz misunderstood Magdalena's question, but do you have an idea of how many or what percentage of the students who do have violations have multiple violations?
It's a fairly small number, but again, it's just violations. So yeah.
Yeah, so they could be big or small. That's just.
But I think the new, I mean, previously we were not reporting these things in Maxient. So the question that you're asking, actually, we're hoping that Maxient helps us answer that question and helps us with enforcement and identifying repeat offenders. So, I mean, that's the hope. That's why all the associate deans got together with Alexis, and we've been trying to work on this because, as Liz said, one violation is not too big a deal, maybe, but if they keep doing it over and over again, and you have documentation of a pattern, then you know it needs to be dealt with differently than an individual incident.
Do we have any students who actually go to the disciplinary committee for their violations, or that were actually dismissed from college? Did that ever happen?
There are definitely students who go through the conduct process, but
That's what I meant, yeah.
I'm not aware personally of any that have gone through the conduct process and have been suspended or kicked out, but I don't think that I've been getting looped in on suspensions and expulsions farther back than this past year. So it could be that it's happened, but I think that for the most part, students who go through the conduct process end up with an academic penalty plus something else, basically sort of community service level penalty, where they have to do something to show that they've been properly re-educated.
Paul and I dealt with an incident where I thought there should have been severe consequences. With Paul's help, I was able to keep myself on the right side of the table in that incident, but I don't know whatever happened with that. But there are times when you're dealing with it, you feel like what Magdalena is asking, somebody should be separated from college and stuff. I mean, the individual we are talking about had somebody else come and take an exam on their behalf.
Yeah, not the best of times. But I think from the standpoint of the system, I think the system that we have now works. And as long as faculty are reporting violations, it's going to continue to work, and it's going to do the things that we want it to do as far as repeat offenders. It will catch them and they will be dealt with. And ultimately they're going to, some of them are going to feel the full penalty of the law.
If a student cheats on the math placement test, is that also a violation, or can we only report things in our classes?
Oh, Pat Pacitti has been through this one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and really there's, and the separate conversation here is that the intellectual integrity policy has been in a state of flux for a protracted period of time, and it will be fixed. But even so, within the policy now, it is vague enough that it doesn't say that it just has to be in a class. So really, from the standpoint of the associate deans, anything that a student does that is contrary to the spirit of the policy is, is valid. We can prosecute.
So that's a change, because the last time I asked that question, it was only covered coursework, was what I was told.
It's certainly our understanding that we can do something now. And the conduct process previously, I don't think was as strong as it is now. But I think the associate dean and the assistant dean in the Division of Student Affairs is, we're on the same page, and we're trying to make sure that those students learn.
So as we begin to transition in the fall back to face-to-face learning, or increasing the face-to-face learning, we still have our online students and maybe other formats, who knows. Has there been discussion in regards to using proctoring tools for our test taking? For example, I know, Liz, you just gave a face, but I mean, I know at Utica College, they're using it for their exams to make sure that students don't browse the answers, because we do have, let's face the reality is I have these concerns with some of my students, wondering if they are the ones taking the exam, and are they searching while they're completing the quizzes or exams. So within the intellectual property or issues or intellectual integrity, has there been discussion about that?
Well, the School of Business, I know, is doing something about that.
Yeah, they're working on something, at least in the School of Business. The School of Business actually, the semester before, I think it was a year ago. That's when I learned. I'll accept my ignorance. I was not aware of Chegg until we had a rash of Chegg incidents in one class, and we had to go through like detailed meeting after meeting with students. They had to come defend and all that. So that was a process in itself. But as a result of that, the School of Business created a task force for intellectual integrity. One of the things that came out of that task force was that they created an honor code, and they've added an intellectual integrity quiz in every course that they have to go through. But one of the other things is, because online is becoming such a bigger part of at least the portfolio of courses within the School of Business, that is something that they have been exploring. Where it will go, I don't know, because especially now with SUNY Online coming on board as well, the proportion of online content is probably going to go up. So I know in the School of Business that is happening. Where it will go, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not directly involved with that process.
We have another session in this room in 4 minutes, so we're going to have to stop. But just a couple of things in terms of proctoring. Teaching centers everywhere recommend against them. They cost almost as much as textbooks. They work really nicely for students with lots of wealth and multiple devices because they're really easy to evade. They won't work with most of the equipment that our lower income students have. So you're effectively excluding those students from classes. So there's a lot of problems with them. They're easily defeated by people who have multiple devices. They won't work if you're living in housing where there's multiple people in the same room, or if you're trying to use a smartphone or a desktop computer without a web camera and so forth. So they're pretty much ineffective and they're expensive. So that's my bit on it. But we're going to have to end the session and close this so we can get the next session opened up and get this video rendered.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.